So in this section, we'll talk about the different types of hardware blue screens of death you can expect to see. So here's what I believe are the top hardware bug checks you'll see out there in the wild. The Stop 80 is one of the prominent bug checks you'll see for hardware failures. In fact, the title of this one is an NMI hardware failure. Now, this bug check can be reflected in several fashions, whether it's a true hardware problem or one that resulted as a crash being forced. I will show you more about that on the next slide. Just be aware that Stop 80 is one of the most prominent hardware bug checks you will see. Another one is the Stop 9C, the machine check exception. This used to be very evident back in the earlier days before Windows Vista or Windows Server 2008. You would see Stop 9 Charlies. Now you typically see what are known as a Stop 124 or a WIA uncorrectable error. WIA stands for Windows Hardware Error Architecture. So that is typically the hardware type crash you will see when a processor fails. You may see out there a Stop 7B, an inaccessible boot device, if for some reason your system disk becomes unavailable and goes offline. The system most likely will crash with a Stop 7B. There's also a Stop 9F. That's a driver power state failure. When some adapter or controller loses power, the system may crash as a result. Finally, there's a Stop 101, which is known as a clock watchdog timeout. This occurs when one of the CPUs in a multi-processor environment is not responding within a time period. So exactly what will trigger a Stop 80 bug check? There's several things. One of them is a true NMI hardware failure. And this is typically caused by a failing I/O device. It's very often that you would want to contact the hardware vendor because they will know how to analyze these particular NMI hardware failure crashes. Another way you can generate a Stop 80 bug check is by pressing a physical button on the server known as the NMI button. There is a Microsoft KB article 2750146 that describes how you can go about utilizing this NMI button to force a crash on a server that has maybe locked up. There's another way you can see a Stop 80 bug check, that is by pressing a virtual NMI button via a remote diagnostic tool like the ILO on the HP models. You can see Microsoft KB article 927069 for more information on setting that up. Finally, you can also encounter a Stop 80 bug check on a virtual machine. There's a new PowerShell commandlet that you can execute on the Hyper-V host called debug-vm-inject non-maskable interrupt-force, which will in fact cause a virtual machine to stop with a Stop 80 bug check.